state government, but local government is going to be in Idaho compared to other states. There was an article, I think, in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times this morning about property tax revenue in other states just crashing. And again, as I read that article, I think about property tax revenue in Idaho, it's almost the opposite of that. So that's just my observation from kind of a seat that I have to be in a position to have dialogue with other governors about what their issues are. And frankly, I often am just quiet because we're just in so much different position than most of the other states. So with that, Mike, I'll try and answer some questions.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get started. We have John Sowell with the Idaho Statesman. John.
Good morning, Governor. Nice to see you.
First questions should always be from somebody from Emmett. So
there you go. I don't mind that at all. You know, just about every week we're having stories talking about the high cost of housing, not only in Boise, but throughout the state. What's the solution that's going to allow people that grew up in Idaho and have worked in Idaho at probably far less wages than people moving in from California, Washington, and Oregon to be able to afford homes?
I didn't know you could use the C word on a press club briefing, but it's an issue that I think about a lot. Of course, obviously, my goal has been that our children choose to stay here and the ones that left to come back, but I've got that in spades now. And it is interesting that a lot of people moving to Idaho have some kind of a familiar tie to the state. Obviously, one of the things we need to do is have more smart growth in housing in the right areas. I think one of the things that's taken place is remote work, and that people can move to some of the areas where housing is more affordable. As we work on our quest for more broadband and better roads, that means that growth can be dispersed out into areas, particularly areas that have had a dislocation, that have lost a major employer, or the existing employers have modernized and are using less help. But building affordable housing and keeping the cost of housing down is a big part of that. I don't know, I've joked about building the wall and making California pay for it, but the reason people are coming here are a lot of the things that I talked about in my introductory remarks, and I don't think I want to push any of those backwards to keep people from moving here. But it is, if you look at the property tax issue and you look at housing affordability, the last time housing got a lot more affordable was during the Great Recession. We had a lot of people out of work, and that is not one of the solutions that I want.
Yeah. I saw my first Don't Californicate Idaho bumper sticker in 1975 and one of my Emmett High classmates. So, it's nothing new, but, it's getting increasingly harder especially in Boise. Emmett's got housing prices I would have never imagined 5 years ago. And, and it's far enough away that people aren't necessarily moving to Emmett to commute back to Boise or Nampa and Caldwell, but it's tough.
Well, for the commute standpoint, I think, smart growth and smart transportation, having the right of way to where we can put the right roads in. One of the interesting things happened in the Treasure Valley, if you look at the growth, particularly at Caldwell, a lot of companies that normally would be domiciled in Meridian or Boise are now, particularly ones that require a lot of labor, are now building out in that commercial area at Caldwell, which is good because it's on the other end of the most expensive ribbon of highway we have in the state, and people are not having to commute. And I think there's going to be more and more of that as time goes by. This hyper growth is something that it's probably something that the state should not complicate for local government, but it's going to have to be addressed by local government, and we need to support them when we do that.
Awesome. Let's go to our second question. This one from Betsy Russell with Idaho Press.
Betsy's first press club briefing.
Well, maybe not quite. Governor, of course, as you're aware, we're in the midst of a hot and heavy legislative session. Can you tell us what you think of the focus of lawmakers in this year's legislative session thus far?
Well, Betsy, kind of goes back to what I started about earlier. The list of things it seems like, in my experience, and I know yours also, there always needs to be something to argue about. And given our employment, given our revenue, given all the other things, there's always a quest for something to be controversial about. That's kind of natural in a bicameral body. My position all along is introduce a bill. You have an open hearing process with testimony on one side. Then you all write about it or report about it, and then it goes to the other side. So when it goes all the way through the process, generally a lot of those things that people are arguing about get to be better. And I am hopeful that that's the case this year.
Governor, yesterday the House rejected the bill for the $6 million grant for early childhood learning in Idaho, something that you have championed. And this comes on the heels of legislators focusing on things like requiring legislative approval whenever a town wants to rename a street, 2/3 votes for public art, many bills dealing with your emergency powers, banning mask mandates and so on. What is your reaction to these legislative moves?
Well, I mean, a couple of them that I'm aware of. I know the original proposal is either being amended or something else is being done to it. The early childhood one, and that was a federal grant. We're always wary in the state of federal grant, but simultaneously to that, the Education Committee is looking at what we're going to do for literacy this summer to try and help these kids get caught up. An example is the Coeur d'Alene School District just, I think, night before last, agreed to fund all-day kindergarten, and a lot of school districts are putting in, preschool in different areas. I was hopeful that when I talked to Beth Oppenheimer about it, that grant was going to help these school districts address that. That is not to be now, if I understand what happened yesterday, and I'm disappointed in that. But the evidence is overwhelming that what we do for these kids early is something that is good for Idaho and good for our students, and we'll try again.
All right, the next question goes to freelance reporter Heath Drusen.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for this opportunity. A growing far right of your party has called for defiance of pandemic measures in Idaho and is promoting conspiracy theories. Quite a few support militias, supported the Malheur occupation, and continue to share the stage with militia leaders at John Birch Society rallies. Are you concerned about extremism grabbing hold of your party? And what, if any, changes would you like to see?
Well, I don't want extremism to take over anything. I'm also hopeful that that the right policies will crowd out that. We saw because of the pandemic and because of some other things, we saw a lot of activity here at this building this summer that were almost on a constant basis. The interesting thing is here at the, other than some of the legislative proposals that have, the most radical ones get the most reporting, but what I believe, what I'm seeing around here is, yeah, we're not all that excited about it. There's a few people that are, and some of it's relative to their constituents at home, but I am always hopeful and optimistic that the right thing will happen in the end. People that have incredible concerns that are out there, they have a First Amendment right to talk about it, but they don't have a First Amendment right to intimidate other people to participate in the system.
Any follow-up from you, Heath?
No, thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right, we'll go on to the next question from Melissa Davlin at Idaho Public Television.
Morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Governor. Thank you so much for doing this. There have been multiple efforts this session to decentralize the Attorney General's office, taking various forms. Your predecessor, Governor Otter, had spoken in support of this at one point in 2016. I was wondering where you stand on allowing state agencies to seek out outside counsel, and whether you had spoken to the Attorney General about it.
I've, of course, the Attorney General and I sit together on the land board, and we've in fact worked together on a lot of things all the time. And so I'm aware of it. One of the, and I haven't been tracking all of them because they're not even close to being here yet. There was one that I know relative to the land board that didn't make it. We have agencies that have their own legal counsel. And I haven't read the entire text of the bill. I think it would give agencies the option, but it would also be costly. We pay for our attorney generals through SWICAP, which is basically our statewide cost allocation. And so any new proposals there'd be a fiscal impact into it. And in fact, the Attorney General's office, it's like everything else, when they're have their heads down and doing the good work, nobody writes about them. When somebody objects to it, there's a lot of noise about it, but we'll see when the bill gets here. But in fact, if I understand the legislation right, it allows agencies to do something, but I'm not all that excited about making radical changes because I see a lot of the good work they do, but I also understand some of the concern.
And as a follow-up to Betsy's question earlier, you said we'll try again when it comes to the early education issue. Will you try again this session, or is it dead for this year?
No, well, I haven't talked to the state board about it. It just happened yesterday afternoon, and I had some other meetings. But the one thing we will keep trying is to do all we can to support school districts in early learning, whether it be literacy or whatever else is there. And if it's the form of that federal grant or some other form, we'll continue to work at it. And we'll work at the legislature to try and address their concerns. There's always concern when it's a federal grant with strings, some designated and some not designated, and perhaps we can address that. But it is in everybody's best interest, particularly these kids that have a tougher challenges and families that have a tougher challenges, that we have both a constitutional and moral value, a moral obligation to try and help these kids.
All right, the next question goes to Hayat Noramina with the Idaho Statesman.
Thank you, Governor. I just had a question about, to follow up on House Bill 226. I wanted to know a little more your thoughts on what happened, the growing trend of some legislators wanting to refuse federal dollars
But what's House Bill 226? Which one's 226? I missed that. There's a
and to send it yesterday, a case for why Idaho should. I'm sorry, you cut off a little.
Seems like we're having some tech issues with Payette.
We'll give you a rewrite in a little bit.
All right, we can move on, and Payette can also send me the question if she would like. Otherwise, we can just go back to her in just a minute. We're going to go to Connor Swersey with the McClure Center.
Hi, Governor Little. Thank you for doing this. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your thoughts on Representative Simpson's plan for the lower Snake River Dam removal and salmon and steelhead recovery plus water quality increases in the state of Idaho.
Well, there's two questions there. I made it known what my position is on the dams. I've had, Mike's proposal was a concept. One of the things that was interesting to me was there's a lot of people who said, take out the dams. Now we got a rough idea what that costs. But there are a lot of still unanswered questions. And just as I did with my salmon working group, I don't want everybody to just simply be focused on the dams. There's other things that we can and we should do. I look forward to working with the other three governors in the Pacific Northwest about what we can do collectively, what we continue to do through the Planning Council, what else we're doing to try and do all we can to increase the return of our salmon to Idaho. But to Mike's credit, it does put a price tag on it, which is pretty interesting. And it's open to debate about a lot of the unintended consequences. What do you do about the silt? What do you do about and how does all the timing of this work as you're doing all this? So it actually shows how complicated take out the dams is, but I'm not a proponent of taking the dams out, but I applaud Mike for getting the concept out there so people realize what the magnitude of the issue is and what all the unintended consequences are.
Connor, did you have a follow-up question?
Nothing.
Okay. All right, we'll go on to the next question from Jimmy Dawson at Boise State Public Radio.
Hey, Governor. Again, sorry about the lack of bacon this morning, but there was a bill that passed the Senate earlier this week that would add more restrictions to the ballot initiative process, and you vetoed two similar bills a couple of years ago because you were worried that the Ninth Circuit would rewrite Idaho's process. Do you have similar concerns here, especially with this new legal group from former Chief Justice Jim Jones saying they'd use every legal avenue available to stop it if it passed?
Well, I knew it passed. I wasn't, and I haven't done a deep dive on it because it's still got a ways to go. But I just remind everybody to read my veto message of the last bill. But because in my veto message, I says, I understand and am sympathetic to the change in technology about, and not only technology, but kind of the state of the art of signature gathering and what that means as far as what the hurdle is. But I'm also worried about a constitutional challenge, which could happen on both the state level and the federal level.
Thank you.
No follow-up question from you, Jim?
Not right now.
Okay, cool. All right, I did get Payette's question. She was asking, what are your thoughts on the growing trend of legislators attempting to refuse federal dollars? And what's your message to make a case for why Idaho needs or should be accepting it?
Good question. It's a prominent question around here. I remind people that those aren't federal dollars. Those are our dollars. If you look at, I think it's the P. Peterson Foundation in the pandemic, I think Idaho is the lightest color there is. We've received the lowest percentage of, and of course the numbers are staggering about the billions of dollars that went out. Not only just the CARES dollars that came in, but all the rest of them. But those are our dollars. The last time I checked, we taxpayers pay a lot more in federal tax than we do in state tax. But I'm also conscious of the basically the problem when the federal government baits you into a program, and then we have to fund it in perpetuity afterwards. The famous fundship, which is a JPAC word that I actually studied fundships when I was an intern at JPAC in 1976. So it's not a new issue, and I'm cognizant of that. When I go through my budget process and we see a fund shift in there, I always want to make sure that that there's full transparency, that the federal government doesn't come in and start you on a program and then we have basically a liability going forward. But highway funds, about half our funds come from the federal government. Well, that's our fuel tax. That's the way it is. I share the concern of the legislators, but I would remind them that that's our money.
Right, the next question is from student journalist at Boise State University, Stephanie Gohl.
Hi, Governor Little. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you can comment about the Senate Bill 1028, that is an initiative to raise the minimum wage over the next 2 years, and particularly as the price of living in Idaho has risen exponentially, yet minimum wage has not risen in over 10 years.
Well, Stephanie, you're right. The stated minimum wage rate in Idaho hasn't raised, but what has changed over the last 10 years is the number of people that get the minimum wage. And of course, the federal law has, even the federal law that was just stricken by the Senate parliamentarian from the bill, there's an exemption for small businesses, and there's an exemption for starting wages, and there's an exemption for other things. My personal feeling is that is a minimum starting wage, and it only applies to a certain amount of people. I want everybody to be on an upward economic trajectory, and for some people, they need to get a job to begin with before they can go up. I think the federal law says you can pay below the minimum wage for, 6 months. I'd have to go back and look at it. But what I want is a rising wage rate for everybody. And as you've heard the debate in Congress, and Idaho is a great example, the minimum wage to live at Ketchum is different than the minimum wage at Detrimental. And the problem with any federal mandate is what's applicable in one community is not applicable in the other. And that's the problem with a minimum wage. You could have it vary around the state, but the bureaucracy would be more than we could handle. I want wages to grow up. The last time I checked, I think we have less than 1% in Idaho that were earning the minimum wage, but I am all for increased wages, particularly given the cost of housing and the cost of living in Idaho right now. But I don't know that the minimum wage necessarily helps, because there's pretty good evidence that particularly if there's a steep increase in minimum wage, that some people get laid off. And those are the people that need the starting wage to build up to a living wage.
Stephanie, did you want a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
All right, we'll go to the next question from Jack Schemmel at KMVT.
Can somebody hear me?
Now we hear you.
All right, sorry about that. So my question is a little bit off the legislative path, but we've had in the Twin Falls County area and the Twin Falls Magic Valley area, we've had a lot of cities and city councils going about the Second Amendment sanctuary city kind of amendments and stuff like that. And I was wondering if you had any comment on kind of the uptick in that going on around the area.
Well, I think there's awareness. Obviously, there's Second Amendment awareness. Just go try and buy some shells out there right now. But I think the first city in Idaho was, if I'm not mistaken, and probably one of you that are attending knows, I think Greenleaf, and that was like 15 years ago. And the last time I checked, Greenleaf was a pretty nice place to live. So a lot of it is kind of a statement of defiance to whatever is taking place at the federal level. Idaho is a pretty Second Amendment friendly state, and I understand city councils wanting to do that, but I don't know that it's going to make a difference in the everyday lives of the citizens there. And I haven't seen a lot of gun control bills rattle around the Idaho legislature.
Any follow-up from you, Jim?
I just had one generic follow-up. I know the Texas governor moved to kind of allow kind of everything to be open. Has there been any talk for you making a unilateral move like that, or are you going to stay with the Department of Health and Welfare and moving up stages and stuff like that?
Well, this goes back to what I said in my opening remarks. What some of these other states are doing is moving to a position to be like Idaho, where we are right now. I've supported health districts and cities. If they have a high number, that they ought to do what they can to minimize the spread. It's interesting. I haven't looked this morning, but yesterday I only had 5 counties with an incident rate, 4 or 5 counties of over 25, and that's the hurdle. The courts have said they needed to have jury trials. That is vastly different than what it was not very long ago. I think half our counties, about 20, 22 of them, have single-digit incident rates on a 7-day moving average, which is just incredible, which is contrary to what a lot of the public health experts were predicting. So we need people to continue to be careful. We need to continue to watch healthcare capacity, which has been my North Star for darn near a year now. And our healthcare capacity is good. We got a couple areas that we're a little concerned about it, but most importantly, what I spend about a third of my time on is we need to get the vaccine out as fast as we can.
Thank you, Governor.
All right, the next question goes to Joe Paris with KTVB.
Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Governor. Of course, major conversation at the State House is executive power. I've spoken with lawmakers who say the last year or so has really just been a stress test on the length of executive power and emergency declarations. And this goes back to a Cold War era where laws and legislation were formed by fear. And at this point, they think it needs to be changed, clearly, with the continued legislation introduced. Objectively, can you comment on if you think the governor's power in Idaho goes too far, if it can be altered or tailored in any way, or do you honestly believe it's good as is, as it sits right now?
Well, a couple things, Joe. First off, we've in our conversations, and this goes back to last summer, I've got some emergency declarations that are 5, 6 years old on, floods, fire, other events. And every time I have to renew one of those, I go, really? And the reason those are open is we need to do that to have funds available, mainly from FEMA, to go to local areas to basically mitigate the damages of that event. That's state law, and that's what we've done forever. And in fact, some of the legislators that have been most concerned about it, their counties, the ones that have been the beneficiaries of that. I don't have a problem with some of the notification, but I can tell you, and I said it in the State of the State, and I will never vary from this, the no action alternative would have been a disaster in the state of Idaho. What I talked about is where we are economically, where we are in kids in school, where we are in healthcare capacity is a result of the things that I did in consultation with public health experts, in consultation with the business community, and a lot of it in consultation with the legislature, not officially why they were here, but in calls that we had on a weekly or bi-weekly basis with the legislature. It's within their right to look at it. But as I said last summer, propose a bill to change it, have it in one body, have an open debate about it, move it across the rotunda, have a debate about it, and we'll see. They're already seeing some of the unintended consequences. The people today that are getting vaccinated, where the National Guard is serving a critical role in getting the vaccination out, I can't do that if I don't have emergency authority.
I guess as a follow-up, the specific point of contention is that these declarations can roll over. You can roll them over, I guess, unlimited times. And some lawmakers have told me they think after a certain point, that should be stopped, and lawmakers should be able to come back and decide if a declaration goes on. That, I guess, the follow-up would be they want to call themselves back into session or have the ability to do that. What's your take on the legislation that is being talked about this week?
Well, when they get their final bill, I think it'd be interesting for the people of Idaho to look at it about look at where we were the end of November, the 1st of December, when we were literally on the cusp of crisis standard of care. And we were doing everything we could to make sure we had enough healthcare capacity. Even though the stage we were in, restaurants and other areas were open, granted with some limited capacity, those kind of crisis issues really require, as all 49 other governors, as the administration have done, that you have to be kind of on your toes and adapt to those changes. And the whole process of the legislature coming back, they are constitutionally, they are a deliberative body. That's why it's kind of a clumsy system where you have two bodies, and the minority gets to say you read bills 3 times or not. But that's part of the system. That does not bode well for a fire, a flood, a fast-growing pandemic, a foodborne outbreak, all those things that are vested in every state in the chief executive officer.
All right, the next question goes to Keith Riddler with the Associated Press. Sorry, Keith.
Good morning. Good morning. If I could return to the AG's office for just a moment. The lawmakers who are backing the bills to prevent the AG from representing the land board and also give state agencies opportunities to hire their own private attorneys say that they should do that because the AG has a conflict of interest in representing those agencies. Is that a legitimate argument?
Well, I think the land board bill, if I'm not wrong, I think that proposal went down. And there might be some other ones up there. There's so many bills. There's not very many here on my desk, but there's so many bills floating around. I'm not tracking all of them. I track them when they get closer to my desk. But I think the only bill out there that I'm aware of, there probably is some more, is one that basically gives the agencies the option. And, I've got a lot of DAGs that do great work for agencies, and they're a good value for the state of Idaho. There's other areas, but we've got agencies that over time have decided to have their own legal counsel, and there's reasons for that. But I just think, and there might be some other bills, and I'm not aware of what they are.
But you work with Wasden on the land board. Does he have a conflict of interest there, do you think?
Well, there is no question because of some of the things the land board does. We've got, there's always an issue with our what we do from a trust responsibility. But there have been a lot of good counsel that's come from the Attorney General's office to the land board, but there's been some of them, the other four of us that serve on the land board, occasionally, but we have robust discussions about what's policy and what's legal advice. And this bill probably brought that to light a little more. We'll probably have some more discussions about it because you don't want legal advice to get in the way of policy. You need to be aware of the legal advice, but you also have to implement policy.
If I could ask.
Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Just one more question, kind of picking up on some earlier questions. The legislature has come in pretty strong with the ballot initiative, emergency powers stuff, and trying to control local governments. Republicans in the legislature obviously feel they have a mandate, but do you think at this point maybe they've overplayed that a little bit?
Proposing legislation is different than passing legislation and getting it signed. I've been around for quite some time, and just because somebody introduces a bill, particularly if a personal bill, doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. A lot of times it's a statement, and in fact, a lot of times some of those things are a statement of one legislator to basically shore up a promise they made to a constituent, and that's part of the process. But the process works. I mean, the bicameral system where, and frankly, it works better given the way that we project out committee hearings. I think one of the most amazing things that happened this year is people allowing people to testify remotely so that the Treasure Valley doesn't have an advantage over the rest of the state on people testifying in bills. That process works, and it works better than it has, because it used to be if you wanted to, I remember hearings where people drove all the way from either Teton County or Boundary County down here, and the hearing went long, and there was only one day and they didn't get to testify. The way the system works now is better than it's been in the past. It's not perfect, but people introduce bills all the time to make a statement, and I'm keenly aware of that.
Right. Next up is Scott McIntosh with the Idaho Statesman.
Morning, Governor. Do you support school vouchers for private education in Idaho, private schools?
No.
So if there were hypothetically a bill that came to your desk that spent $1 million or $2 million or even $5 million of general fund dollars on scholarships for private school students, is that a bill that you would veto, or would you support that?
Well, nice try. I got to look at the bill. As you're all aware, we because of the pandemic, my financial advisory committee, my education advisors, we made funds available for people at home and for some of that. And I think there's a bill that kind of tacks onto that. But I'm always concerned about anything that dilutes per student funding going out through the formula. Now, there might be some proposals that we'll look at, but a straight voucher program, I've got issues with. But we need to continue to focus on how do we get per student, per classroom funding up to where some of the challenges these kids have, we can get them. We can comply with our constitutional and moral obligation to these kids.
But you see that movement coming? Do you see that movement coming in the legislature?
Well, it's been coming for a long time. I know it'll continue to come, but we'll have the discussion about it, and I'll work with the legislature and the interest groups about it. But you start one of these programs and they'll write the fiscal note, but if they comport with the rules of the joint rules, that fiscal note's supposed to say what the consequences are in all the out years. And a lot of times these programs will start off as a little trial, and then they'll explode, and the net result of them is it really dilutes the funding. 50 cents of all the money we spend, half of all the money we spend goes to public schools, as it should.
Thank you.
Next question goes to Scott Logan with KBOI 2.
Hello, Governor. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Scott.
Good to see you. I just love the smell of coffee in the morning. Governor, there seems to be one bill that is headed to your desk like a stampeding herd of buffalo, and that is the Citizens Initiative ballot, the one that would tighten the rules, of course, to get Citizens Initiative on the ballot. Will you veto that?
I haven't seen the bill yet.
Oh, but you must be familiar
Scott,
with it.
Well, I've heard about it.
And what do you think about what you're hearing?
As I stated earlier, I remind people to go back and look at my veto message of last year and what my concerns are. But I don't make I never say never, never say always. But it's too early for me to make any a determination about that bill.
A follow-up then, sir. We're coming, March, it's been a year, isn't it? Was March 13th was the first case reported in Idaho of COVID. In that past year, you must have been under incredible pressure, but you've also been called by members of the legislature a tyrant. You've been called the man who would be king. Their words, sir, not mine. How has this year changed your view of the role of the governor in our state?
Well, I'm glad it was not my first year as governor. Let's put it that way. I have a high comfort level with my staff here, with the agencies, with my public health team, and that has been, the sacrifices that people made, whether they're people that are working in a hospital or people that are working in public health or the health districts, people that have had to struggle through having their jobs, whether it was a government edict or whether it was the fact that consumer confidence because of the pandemic was so low. But as I stated initially, the incredible resilience and the entrepreneurialism that existed this year makes me very proud of the people of Idaho, that we are where we are relative to not only every state, but most areas of the world about what's taking place here in Idaho. And yes, it's been a challenge. And yes, I've been called some naughty words, but I understand that. It kind of goes with the territory. You got to get stuff done during an emergency. And when you get stuff done, there's people that are going to have a good philosophical difference with you. But that shouldn't, you need to be aware of it, but it shouldn't deter you from doing your job.
Well, this is territory we've never really seen.
If you go way back in history, look at there was a point in time during the recession in the late 20s that the state didn't know whether they'd be able to pay their bills. There was look at the turmoil that was on the streets during the Vietnam War. Look at the lack of confidence that took place a few times. This has been a challenging time, but we've gone through a lot of challenges in this great country, in this great state, and we always come out with a new and improved model. But unfortunately, there's some people that have really had to make some sacrifices, and even worse than that, the people that have had a loss of life or lost a loved one, which is a real tragedy.
Thank you, sir.
All right, the next question goes to Eric Grossarth with EastIdahoNews.com.
Hi, Eric.
Hello. So yesterday, President Biden said that he expects there to be enough vaccine for every American by the end of May. Is that something that is doable for Idaho? And Is that something you've heard as well?
Eric, finally a vaccine question. I did the AARP call yesterday, and I had one question that wasn't vaccine. So as I said, I spent an inordinate amount of time on it. I don't think the math adds up unless they're, I had a call yesterday with the national governors and Jeff Zients, who is the lead White House COVID person, and what they're telling us, the amount of vaccine we're going to get does not comport with having that much vaccine. You know, and of course the vaccine that they send to the state that we apportion out to the health districts and the providers, and now they're sending some around to the national pharmacy, some around to the retail pharmacy, some out to the health clinics. They act like we don't have a good relationship. We have a great relationship with all of them. But I just need more vaccine for us to get to that point. I would be delighted if there was enough vaccine. Every day I ask the question of health districts on my public health team, can we triple and quadruple the amount of vaccine that we're getting out? And they keep assuring me we can, but we keep kind of moving resources around to where we can do that. And that's why it's important for me to have the authority to use the National Guard and some other things from a regulatory standpoint to make sure there's no encumbrances to getting the vaccine out. I would love to have everybody vaccinated by the end of May, but the numbers that they're telling us about the amount of vaccine, I did the math yesterday after the call, and then I sent an email to my public health team that it looks like we're going to have about 120% of what we have right now. That isn't going to get us nearly to that point that the president talked about, but he may know something that I don't. I wish he'd share it with myself and the rest of the governors.
Thank you.
All right, the next question goes to David Lund, student journalist and freelancer.
Thank you for that. Good morning, Governor. You made a point to mention prisons in each of your State of the State addresses thus far. Considering that both the Idaho Freedom Foundation and the American Civil Liberties Union have both claimed that 21% of adult Idahoans have a criminal history, in which ways does the future of our current prison system and criminal justice system in Idaho concern you?
Well, you can't talk about that in a vacuum. When I was lieutenant governor, I remember asking the director, the chairman of the Board of Corrections and the director about all the on-ramps and off-ramps from a troubled grade school child to a lifer in prison. And so when you talk about corrections, you got to talk about all aspects of it. You got to talk about substance abuse. You got to talk about behavioral health. You got to talk about education. You got to talk about early childhood learning. You got to talk about all those things. And that stops the inflow into corrections. Then after you get them into corrections, then you got to have programs which the Board of Corrections, Director T-Wald are doing a really good job on, vastly better than we've done in the past, of having programs to where we can train them, where we can stop that recidivism and that revolving door out there. That's all a big part of the Department of Corrections. But I got to tell you, the legislature, the people on this call tend to pick out things that they're doing that kind of stand out. They've been very supportive of a lot of the efforts we have here to make sure that we have the resources to basically take these prisoners and give them these inmates and give them an opportunity to go out and be productive members and citizens and keep our state safe. So there's a lot of programs, but literally it starts with, as you remember last year, we put some money into behavioral health into the K-12 budget for counselors to help these kids early, because if I can spend a little bit of money in grade school, junior high, and high school and not have them go into the corrections system, it's a great investment for the state of Idaho. So that's part of the holistic corrections issue We are very excited about our Behavioral Health Council that has the judicial branch, the executive branch, the legislative branch. We know, I was in 2 meetings yesterday, we know there's going to be some more funding coming on the settlement of the Purdue Pharma opioid legislation. I actually talked to the Attorney General about that this weekend. There's going to be some resources there to put into this. These are all part of the complexity of the corrections issue.
All right, the next question.
follow-up.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, David.
Along that lines is one of the items on the ballot in Kootenai County in November was an advisory vote on a proposed prison reentry center here. More than 70% of voters opposed that center. So if you were speaking to current or formerly incarcerated Idahoans, what would you tell them when they're facing this level of opposition when they're returning to their communities?
Well, of course, I every time I go up to Kootenai County, I get asked about it. And, you know, the issue is, the raw math is that those people that are released are going to come back. The question is, do you want them coming back with the skill, with training, with the resources they need to be productive members of society or not? I understand people's concern. You know, there's always that NIMBY attitude about where do you have a reentry center. But these reentry centers work, and I've just got to make my case to the good people in Kootenai County about the value of that. And if they've got some particular concerns, we need to address them. But helping these people reenter is critically important. Not having a reentry center does not mean that people that have got issues are not going to come back in their community. Because if you look at the vast majority of our people in our corrections system, they're going to get out at some point in time. The question is, do they get out with the resources they need to be productive members of society?
Thank you.
All right, the next question goes to Kelsey Mosley Morris with State's Newsroom.
Hi, Governor.
Kelsey.
Property tax relief is obviously top of mind for a lot of Idahoans, but it seems like every time a bill comes up in the legislature that aims to do that, it's opposed by the mayors of various cities because of its potential effects on their city budgets. So I was just wondering if you think there is a way to bring property tax relief to homeowners without having a detrimental effect on city budgets.
Well, there's 3 things you can do. As we have done since statehood, the state can pick up, you know, we originally ran this whole state on sin taxes and property taxes. And that was before income taxes, that was before sales taxes. We can do that, and that won't impact anything. We can do a shift where different classes of property pay a higher percent of it, or we can put in programs to cut spending. Well, and there's probably one other thing we can do is the state can pick up some of the obligation the local government has. Those are the options out there. And if you get to that, if you understand those fundamentals, then some of the options that are out there become more clear. I fully understand, and you know, nobody would have predicted. You know, we lead the nation and perhaps the world in appreciation of residential property, particularly in some communities. That is, and that is a recipe for a shift, and that's what's taking place out there. There's you know, I talk to the legislative leadership and legislators a lot. Nothing has come together yet, but perhaps it will.
Thank you.
All right, the next question goes to Audrey Dutton with the Idaho Statesman.
Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Governor. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for joining us. I wonder, now that we're at the year mark, what do you wish you'd known a year ago about how the pandemic would unfold in Idaho? I'm hoping you can give us one challenge you didn't expect and one good surprise.
Well, probably the biggest one, the phones here in this office, was when the federal government, and that's why I'm concerned about this bill that's being debated right now. When they stand up a whole new program, we don't have the infrastructure to handle it like they did with the, we were already besieged with a huge increase in unemployment as a result of the initial wave of layoffs because of the pandemic. And if I knew earlier what superstructure state government I need to beef up and have, that would make it to where it was embarrassing. Some of you on this call were the ones that were needling me, rightfully so, for the time it took for us to get those programs implemented. There's some programs coming in the new bill that I'm a little concerned about. Probably the second thing is getting out and telling the people of Idaho, first explain to them that it's a novel coronavirus. That just because a public health person says, we think the virus is going to do something, if it doesn't, please don't lose faith in public health care. It's a virus, and viruses change, and we just don't know about it. Everybody thought it was going to be seasonal. It wasn't seasonal, which is startling. We think it might even be seasonal now. So communications to the state, and we started our One Idaho program, and we think that part of the reason our numbers are down is as the awareness out there. But having that heart-to-heart with the people of Idaho about the novel nature of it and the necessity for everybody to choose to do the right thing. I wish I would have done that earlier, and I wish I would have known what those federal programs so we could build up a superstructure to hand it. But I got a lot longer list than that, but that's all we got time.
We've already kept the governor over about 5 minutes, but we have one more question that came in from Aaron Braun with The Economist.
Hi, Governor. Good morning. Thank you for doing this.
Good morning.
At the top of this call, you mentioned that expanding broadband internet and infrastructure might help spread out the growth that the state is seeing a little bit. I'm curious if you think there are other steps the state can take to help local communities manage the booming population growth and the uptick in housing prices.
Well, I mean, my budget or my state of the state budget message is we're going to do I proposed, and I believe the legislature is going to take it up, that we give some of this, we think some of it's windfall taxes back to the people of Idaho. We've got to spend some money on infrastructure, and that's at the local level and the state level. And then, as you alluded to, the broadband. Fortunately, last year, the legislature, we set up an office, so we've got a place to where we can kind of aggregate the needs from all over the state. The federal CARES money that came in, we got, the problem with that was the narrow time frame that we had to spend that money, which was really compressed. And it means we had to basically overspend because there was a shortage of fibers, shortage of contractors, a shortage of some of the hardware. Now we've got a little more time, and we also know where some of our weak links are. I was in Orofino probably a month ago now, and we took some state money and put in there, and a private entity came in and used that state money to put out a lot of fiber in there, and now they're doing the infill with their own money into what you would call urban Orofino, if there is such a thing as urban Orofino. But that's taking place all over the state of Idaho. And that's one of the best ways we can help these local communities. Some of the local communities have done it with the local improvement district. I have some concerns about it, but you can't argue with the success they've had at Ammon. And it's kind of, let's look at all the options to get that broadband out, because that's basically a utility that people need to have for education, for commerce, for quality of life, and particularly for the growing field of telehealth, which we've expanded by 4,000% in Idaho. We're very proud of that. So, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Governor Little, for taking the time to answer these questions. We appreciate it. Every year, you stopping by and helping us. I want to make sure everybody knows to watch the Idaho Press Club website and social media to see the upcoming events and opportunities. And don't forget, the Legislative Luncheon is coming up next week, noon on March 8th. Similar to this, it is a virtual meeting, so you'll want to register ahead of time and make sure you get your slot. Space is limited. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And thanks again, Governor Little.